If you believe that you do not deserve love, then you will not be able to attract love. You won't even believe that maybe you're lovable. If you believe that you are only deserving or worthy of having a job where you make $50,000 or $40,000 or $30,000 a year, then you will only apply to the jobs that constitute that type of money. You will only attract the clients into your life or whatever it is that keeps you at that level. That is because we get in life a reflection of what we believe we deserve. And in this video, I'm going to show you one of the most life-changing realizations you can have. I'm going to share with you my journey of going through this process and how I went from somebody that was constantly looking for the validation and the approval of others, someone that felt like I had to constantly prove my own sense of self-worth to other people, how I went from feeling like I was broken and there was something wrong with me to feeling 100% worthy, whole, and complete. Maybe 95%. There's always different levels, I think, worthiness that we can tap into. However, I feel like a completely new version of me, a worthy version of me. I don't have to search for validation and approval like I used to. And I want to share with you what made all the difference and what may make the difference for you. Where in 6 months from now, you look back and you see that this is the video that changed everything. That's what I want to share with you. And I want to literally prove it to you that you are worthy. So first off, let's remember this. Our beliefs create our reality. Now, at the inherent truth of what is being believed here that is having us believe we're not worthy, it's a belief that there's something wrong with us. So this is one of the first realizations that I had. And this realization actually came from back when I went through my awakening in 2011-ish, 2012, where I was searching for a solution to the problem of people always telling me that there's something wrong with you. People would literally say those words to me. They say, "What is wrong with you?" And the reason they would say, "What is wrong with you?" was because I had a lot of energy. I was working, at Nordstrom's at the time, and I was always like messing around with customers. I had a very loud, kind of very outgoing personality that I think for some people that were a little bit more introverted, maybe it was just a lot for them. But my level of energy, I had a high level of energy, and people would say, "What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you?" And then so much to a point to where I was like, okay, maybe I need to fix this. And my way of fixing it was I had heard of something called Adderall, which is helps you like focus when you have ADHD. And I went to a doctor, and I told them that I was having trouble focusing and that people always said there's something wrong with me, so I must have a lot of energy. And this doctor gave me Adderall, which I took. And I took that for about a year. And when I took it, I was able to very easily focus. And just to give it kind of a context too, I would drink 4 shots of espresso and be totally still, super calm. And I would drink Red Bull, same thing. Caffeine had the opposite effect on me. And which was another thing that maybe wired in, like maybe there's something wrong with you. Everyone else that drinks coffee, they get very alert and awake. And I do it, I get calm, But basically, there was a belief that was stemmed there that actually even came from earlier than that. I believe that belief was stemmed when I was a kid, believing there's something, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. And I think there was also this desire to always have to prove myself to others, where I would look for people's validation and approval. I would look for people to tell me that I'm enough or to feel that I'm enough. And I would, in a way, also have to over provide for others and over deliver so that I could feel worthy. And a lot of times I'd also attract people in my life that I felt like I had to fix. Because the thing is if I could fix somebody else, that was my perspective, which also implies that they're broken, which isn't always the most constructive thing. But if I would be willing to go above and beyond what any other lover or person they'd be with, then they'd maybe keep me around. So this all stemmed from a belief that I'm not worthy. And what ended up happening is the more that the power was in, honestly, me reframing a lot of the beliefs and the definitions that people gave me. What if when people said, back in the day, I had a stronger sense of frame, and people said, "What's wrong with you?" What if I had the frame and I was like, "What's wrong with you?" Not that I was trying to gaslight them back, but what if I was like, I have a lot of energy. There's nothing wrong with me. It is normal for me to have this level of energy. And the time as well, what I eventually realized is I learned meditation. I learned how to observe my thoughts. I learned how to not react. And I learned how to bring the awareness into my body. And that was a game changer at first back in 2011, 12 when I learned this, because then that was also when my spirituality, I began to focus more on spirituality. And I began doing things like I began finding other alternatives to taking Adderall. And that included walking barefoot on grass, because I just concluded, I took back the meaning that there's something wrong with me and that having a lot of energy is bad. And I started to see it as a good thing. Like, think about it. So many people have ADHD. What if instead of people believing that they have this huge disorder, there's something wrong with them, what if instead you realize that people with ADHD have a lot of energy that needs to be channeled into the things they actually love? That they need to learn how to manage their energy, that they can ground themselves on grass, ground themselves and meditate, and that they in a way have this like superpower ability to like channel a lot of energy. It reframes the meaning. It reframes how they're internalizing it. So back in 2011 or 12, one of the things and one of the major tools I want to share with you in this video that will help you it's the power of the reframe. It is to reframe the meaning that you've been giving to yourself or that you've adopted from others, and to give it your own meaning. Because what I did is I reframed and I dropped the identity. I let go of the identity that you have ADHD, and I, in a way, absorbed the identity, or I absorbed the energy of having a lot of energy, of just being and having a lot of energy, and knowing that I need to ground myself. I need to manage this energy in a different way. So one thing that I did is even working at Nordstrom's, I would go outside. This is in Las Vegas. I would go outside to the Trump Hotel across the street where there was some grass. I would take off my leather shoes that I was wearing, and I would walk barefoot on grass. And I would do that on my lunch break. Or some days I'd go out to the valet, because there was always nice cars, and I liked looking at nice cars sometimes. Used to like visualizing me in a new reality, which is funny because now I could buy like a crazy car, like a Lamborghini or an Aston Martin or something. And I don't because once you become the person that you always desired to be, your values a lot of times will change. I don't value necessarily really nice cars. Even though at the time I thought it was maybe I was valuing it when I was working at Nordstrom's, because I thought what that would mean for me to have an Aston Martin is the validation, the approval. It'd be easier to pick up chicks. Maybe that was a perspective, you know what I mean? But one thing I remember doing is a lot of things changed for me when I began to take the meaning back and I began to reframe these things about me. Instead of having ADHD and needing Adderall, which, by the way, was a beneficial thing because it led me to wanting to learn meditation, because the side effects of Adderall were it couldn't eat very much, couldn't sleep very much, which meant that I also had to smoke a lot of cannabis at night for me to fall asleep and to relax, which means I was codependent on these substances. I was codependent on Adderall and cannabis, and that felt very disempowering to me. So then I went online and I looked up other alternatives for ADHD, and one of them was meditation. And then that led me to watching videos on meditation. That led to me observing my thoughts. And within a week or two of meditating, it completely changed my vibration. I felt like a majority of the time, I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, I felt like a 3. I would smoke weed and I'd go up to a 5. I would take Adderall, I'd go up to a 5. And then I'd crash and go back down to a 3. Then I learned meditation, and I started to feel different. I started to feel, by bringing the awareness into my body, by observing my thoughts, I started to feel like a 7 or 8 out of 10. And then what would happen is I would smoke or drink or take Adderall out of habit, and it would bring me down from the 7. And over the course of a couple weeks, 7 became my natural set point. Not saying I became enlightened or anything, but I literally would realize that why am I doing these other things? It's dropping me. And it came from meditating, observing my thoughts, even observing my beliefs, observing my self-image, I remember when I was working, they say you get in life a reflection of what you believe you deserve. I realized that part of my self-image working that 9-to-5 job at Nordstrom's was that I'm an average sales employee. At the end of every day, at the beginning of every day, the next day from the day before, there was the sales of the top salespeople from the day before. And I realized that I always saw myself in the middle of the list. Not at the top, not at the bottom, in the middle. I was an average sales employee. And that's the numbers that I did because it was a sales commission job. So what I did is I let go of the mentality, the belief system of being a mediocre employee, which means I would only greet probably a certain amount of people. Mediocre employees wouldn't take pride in what they're doing. They wouldn't be passionate when they're speaking. Maybe a little bit here and there, but not consistently. I realized that the top salesperson version of me greeted every customer. Didn't selectively choose, is this person going to buy or not? I greeted every customer. Had a positive mental attitude. I realized that I'd have fun with customers. I'd show my personality more. I'd focus on adding value to them. I focused on becoming that version of me. Within days of doing this and learning this, by the way, and embodying that version of me, I started to consistently be at the top of that list. And it was a simple shift of identity, a simple shift of letting go of the belief that this old me is who I am. But if we go back now to the version of me that was feeling 100%, feeling not worthy, a lot of what changed in my life as well, because one thing I was doing is I was consistently attracting people into my life that were reflecting back to me familiar childhood dynamics. So even at that moment when I was working there, I had that of the manager that was the same exact personality matrix of my ex-stepmom, narcissist, gaslighting, talking down to people. And what ended up happening is as I started to meditate and as I started to believe and realize as well, I started to become aware that there's people in my life that are completely reflecting back the same familiar childhood dynamics from when I was a kid. As I became aware of this energy, I'm like, wait, what the hell am I doing? And what part of me, why do I still have someone in my life that is reflecting back my ex-stepmom from 7 to 15 that was in my life, that was controlling, manipulative? Why is this person in my life now that I'm like 22 years old working at Nordstrom's? And one thing that I had to do to let that go is I had to forgive. I had to forgive my ex-stepmom. I had to let go of that energy because I think there was a lot of stored, repressed anger inside of my body. And one thing that I had to do is I had to let that go. And I had to realize, one thing that helped me let that go, by the way, too, was I saw that everyone is always doing the best they can with what they've got. Everyone's doing the best they can from the level of consciousness they were at. That was huge for me. So like, for example, if someone betrays you or someone steals from you, you could internalize that and say, oh, there's something wrong with me. It's reaffirming that belief. But even think of somebody that has a high sense of self-worth and somebody cheats on them or somebody steals from them, betrays them. Somebody has a high sense of self-worth, they wouldn't internalize it. They'd be like, oh, that's your fault. You fucked up. And it wouldn't be a part of their reality. But somebody that has a lower sense of self-esteem or self-worth would say, oh, see, it's reaffirming that I'm not worthy, I'm not whole, I'm not complete. When in actuality, it's a neutral thing. It's a neutral thing that happens. Think about that too. Your childhood, the things that happened to you in childhood were neutral things that we gave meaning, that we all give meaning to. And maybe a lot of us can agree that there were shitty things that happened. But based on the meaning we give it, is the meaning we're attached to is what we continue to experience in our life. So there were beliefs from my own childhood that I can see where I believed people were trying to control me. I had to fight for my freedom. Well, guess what? After my ex-stepmom left my life, I attract people into my life where I always had to edge and fight for freedom. And then when I forgave my ex-stepmom, because I realized she was doing the best she could with where she was, I also realized that her dad treated her the same way. So she was just acting out the pattern. Didn't make it right, but it did help me understand her more. And then I was able to realize and just let that go. And as I let that go, within 2 weeks of doing that, that manager got fired. And I didn't have to deal with that again. There were still people that came into my life later on, now that I think about it, that kind of did embody some of that energy, but it was less and less as time went on. Because once you realize your own sense of self-worth, and once you're also willing to walk away from somebody that's treating you like shit, you set the standard higher within the universe. It's almost like you learned the lesson. One time this guy, I know I've told this before, one time this guy named Roland came in and was started working in salon shoes at Nordstrom's in the department that I was in. And one time, the first time, the manager named Julie talked down to this guy named Roland. What happened is she was like talking down to him in the back stock room. He literally looked at her like funny and was like, and like cursed. He's like, why the fuck are you talking to me like this? And he literally walked out on the job. He walked out, quit like that. Because he would not be, he's like, I don't care how much I'm getting paid at this job or this commission thing. You don't talk to me like that. And he walked out. Always remember that, because he had a higher sense of self-worth. Whereas all the other 10 or 12 people I worked with, it's like we allowed ourselves to get talked down to because she was protected by upper management. We wanted the job or whatever. And once you started, waking up to that, that's when things started to change. So reframing the meaning and starting to give things your own meaning. I reframed having ADHD, started to realize I have a lot of energy. I found my own solutions that intuitively resonated with me, like walking barefoot on grass, meditating. I forgave my ex-stepmom. I let go of the old meaning that there's always a woman in my life trying to control me. And as I let these things go, I started to feel more free. As I let these things go, my outer reality began to change. I want to share a story I haven't shared before, because this is something that I've realized also in my own life, that when it comes to other people, the more I would try to prove my sense of self-worth to people, the more it emphasizes that I'm not enough. And the key is to not try to prove yourself, to know that you are worthy for being you. That's it. And we'll get more into that, into a concept that I think will completely change your perspective on this in a minute. But one thing that I remember, there's two situations I want to share. One is I remember one of my first girlfriends ever in high school. And I remember that when I was with her, there was an aspect of, I didn't really know how to act in relationships, because I wasn't allowed to have relationships until I was like 18 years old, pretty much, because from 7 to 15, I had the ex-stepmom in my life. And then it took me a couple years to like literally to be social and get to know people and to be like socially aware and like socially normal, I guess you could say, because I was kind of in my own little box with my brother. My brother and I, from 7 to 15, really only had each other. We were playing outside or working outside, and then playing like when secretly, because we weren't allowed to have friends or do any other stuff. But basically at 15 years old, I was allowed to like have friends and stuff. And then it took me a couple of years to get into that. And then 18 years old, I had my first girlfriend. And one of the things that I remember happened is when we were in a relationship, I was always trying to prove myself to her. And she was definitely at the time more of a, she was definitely more dominant in the sense that she had the power, where I was kind of like a little puppy dog, just excited to have like this girlfriend in my life because it was so new to me. Now, I remember that eventually what happened is we were together just a couple months, but there was always this needy energy that I had where I wanted her validation. I wanted her approval. And then eventually things weren't working out. And I was sad about it, but then I had to then we detached. And it wasn't by choice necessarily, because I still wanted to be with her. However, things started to happen and we separated. And then I started to date I started to become friends with other people in different friends group. And then I started dating this other chick, not really dating, but like we had a crush and we were flirting. And it was like this one could feel it. The other one could feel it. And as soon as I let go of that one, the other one, the older one, all of a sudden came back, called me crying, wanted to get back together. And it was this crazy energy. Whereas when we were together and the energy was flipped and I was trying to prove myself, that energy wasn't there. At the same time, when we were even together, she was going to go to this school dance with another guy, with actually an ex-boyfriend. And all these other friends that found out about it were like, that's so fucked up. And they would say that to her, and then she would feel like, and it was like, I was just allowing it. I was like, oh, well, if she wants to, because I was so weak at that point. But then eventually what happened is I let her go, moved on, and then she wanted me back. I'm like, this is so interesting. Once I let go of caring, then that validation came back. And here's one of the reasons why. When you want someone else's validation or approval, you want something from them, they can feel it. It's literally emphasizing, I'm not good enough. When you detach from wanting anything from them because you don't believe that they have what you need, or you don't believe that they're even good for you, all of a sudden, that level of attraction goes up times 10 because that needy energy isn't there. Neediness is like the kryptonite to attraction. So when you let go of neediness, you then naturally become attractive. Part of the neediness is the belief that somebody else has something that you want. Now, here's another example. I'm not going to name any names here, but back in when I first got on YouTube, I collaborated with another YouTuber in LA. And I remember when I met this person, I had him on a pedestal. I thought, this is such a cool guy. Oh my God, he's got hundreds of thousands of subs. At the time, I had like 100,000 subs. He had like 300,000 or 400,000. And I was like, oh my God, he's so cool. And I remember that I was putting him on a pedestal, and then when I met him, I could tell I was kind of being a little bit needy, and I was excited to be there because I hadn't met another YouTuber and stuff, and we made a video together or something like that. But I remember the first time I saw him, I had that needy energy, and it was kind of weird, and I could just tell he didn't really respect me. And another thing that happened is when I got to his house, I waited outside his house. I drove 4 hours from Vegas to LA, got to his house, called him, let him know I was at his house, and it took him 40 minutes to come out just to say hi, just to get me to bring me up. 40 minutes. And I was like, what? And I remember just like waiting, but I was like, oh, this is just normal, because there was a low sense of self-worth there. Then I hung out with him. Then what happened was something interesting. Hung out, made a video, whatever. The next time I saw him, something very similar happened, where I went to his house, and then he still kind of had the energy. I could tell where he didn't respect me, but it's because I didn't respect myself, so I'll give you that. But here's something interesting that happened. I then waited an hour and a half outside his house because he said he was on the phone with his publisher. And I felt like that was bullshit. So I'm on the phone with some publisher, and he was on the phone for an hour and a half. I was waiting outside, and then eventually I got like kind of pissed, and then I went to the gym and I worked out. And then like another half an hour later, he's like, oh yeah, you can come over now. I'm done to call my publisher, which I knew was bullshit. I believe he was on the phone with his girlfriend and he was going through something. But nonetheless, that's when my respect started to go down. And I started to see how human this person was. I started to like take off the halo effect. Then what happened is I think we made another video together or some shit. But then what happened is I started to realize my own sense of self-worth. And something interesting happened. What ended up happening is as I started to feel more worthy, he started to respond to me differently. I could tell that then he started to appreciate, and he started to ask me, like I would give him advice on things. It was like I was leveling up my own sense of self-worthiness, but then he started to respect me more. Then it wasn't so weird and needy for me to be around him. I started to value myself more, and it was like a completely different reflection where I had more self-respect, and he would respect and value me more because I was valuing me more. And I always remember that because I was like, oh, I just let go of putting this person on a pedestal. I started to realize my own sense of self-worth, and then I started to get a new reflection. So one thing that's important to do is to understand is to feel into your own sense of self-worth, not from necessarily an ego point of view. Because I could be like, well, I've created hundreds of thousands of subs on YouTube. I am worthy. It's more so realizing your sense of identity, your sense of values, the person you are and the values you live by. Because when you don't have values that you've chosen, you will search for other people to give you frame. You will search from other people to tell you you're enough or to tell you you're worthy. But what changed for me is when I started to value myself and I started to appreciate myself, that's when things changed. Now, even in dating, I remember a huge game changer 2 years ago. I'm single now, but like 2 years ago when I was also single, before I met my most recent ex-girlfriend, I went through a phase of where I started to finally feel my own sense of self-worthiness. And then I had all these reflections of like love opportunities, which was so funny because here I am on YouTube, not trying to just like, like brag or anything, but like I had friends that were like, well, you have like, you have all this things that are going well in your life. You're successful. You have all this clout on social media. Why would it be hard for you to attract love or to attract love potentials? I'm like, I don't know. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. But there are two things I realized. One was that I was really self-critical and self-judgment of the woman I was dating. So I would be like, oh, are they going to be spiritual enough? Are they going to be this enough? Are they going to look at themselves? And I would find so many reasons that there was something wrong with the people I was dating, why I shouldn't even try. They're going to only want me for my money. I had all these like negative beliefs. What I had to do is I had to stop judging, and I had to start appreciating even the woman I would spend time with. I would appreciate and I would stop judging. And the more I would stop judging, the more that then I found out that I would open up opportunities. But the second thing was I had to start feeling worthy for being me, not just because I'm a YouTuber, I have money, worthy for just being me. I started to realize the qualities that made up like my uniqueness, not in an ego way where I'm like, yeah, I'm so fucking special, but more so in a way to where I realized that that the childhood pain that I had, where the belief that I'm broken, it came from childhood, and I had to realize that growing up, the emotional inability of my parents or the belief that I was broken growing up, it wasn't my fault that my parents divorced. It wasn't my fault that maybe mom or dad was emotionally unavailable when I was a kid. And the more I realized that it wasn't my fault, the more I was able to let go of the belief that there was something broken or something wrong with me. And the more that then I could just simply feel worthy. So feeling worthy isn't so much about like, okay, I'm worthy. Let me feel worthy. Let me wire in. What does it feel like to be the most worthy version of me? It's more so about letting go of the belief that you're broken, letting go of the shame. Shame is like I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. Letting that go and realizing it's not your fault. It's probably not even yours. I recently in breathwork let go of so much shame that I thought was mine. And the way the shame got released in breathwork was there was a woman in front of me that started screaming because she had sexual trauma. I could just energetically feel it. And in breath work, there's a lot of release of emotion, and you're in a room of people, and there's people crying, laughing, yelling. This woman starts screaming. I immediately thought of my mom and all the trauma that my mom went through. And in that moment that she was screaming, I felt my mom's pain, and then I was able to release that from my body. And after I did that, I was crying, tears coming down my face. I was able to feel so emotionally open, heart open, because I released the energy that was stored in my body. A lot of the shame, a lot of the belief that we're broken, a lot of the energy that we repress inside of our bodies, I believe, isn't even ours. We've picked it up and we identified with it and we thought that we had to carry it around. And if we were to let it go, then we feel like maybe we'd be betraying our family. Maybe we'd be betraying somebody else, or everything somebody else went through wouldn't have been worth it. But the more I've let go of that neediness, of needing other people's approval, other people's validation, the more I've been able to then validate myself. Think about it too. There's you. Think about it like three circles. There's you, there's God, and there's other. So there's self, other, God. Now, imagine that in these three spheres, when we grow up, a lot of times we don't validate ourselves. We don't feel validated. And maybe our parents growing up didn't validate us or didn't show us how to have a healthy sense of self-esteem or confidence. So then what happened is we, in ourselves, started looking to other. We started looking outside of ourselves for worthiness, for validation, for approval, because our needs weren't met growing up, so we're trying to find it on the outside. So then what happens is then you start dating someone, you want them to text you all the time because you want the constant validation that you're worthy. Trying to prove yourself to your friends, to over-deliver to friends and family so that they'll love you. And the more you try, the more you send your energy outside of yourself, the more depleted you feel. When in fact, the perspective that really has helped me is understanding that I can validate myself, but also being connected to a higher power, being connected to God, source, energy, universe. And the more I've been able to feel worthy for simply being me, knowing the universe doesn't make mistakes. Think about that. Everything in our reality has a purpose. The grass, the trees, the birds, the bees. Everything has purpose. Everything is worthy simply because it exists. The universe does not make mistakes. God does not make mistakes. If you exist, then you exist for a reason. In the same way that the trees exist, in the same way that you wouldn't look at a baby and say, oh, is that baby worthy? Of course the baby's worthy. The baby is worthy just because it exists, because it's a baby. But then what happens is we grow up from a baby and we begin to take on these beliefs. We begin to take on these meanings to say, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. We begin to internalize the things that happen to us and believe that it has something to do with our sense of self-worth. And then we try to overextend ourselves or prove ourselves to other people. The key to healing is letting go of all of that, letting go of the meaning, letting go of the old story, letting go of the belief that you're broken. And when you let that go and realize that you are worthy for just being you, you will stop trying to over-explain yourself so much. You'll stop sending a whole bunch of happy emojis just so everyone always feels no tension. You'll stop abandoning yourself for other people. That all stems from outdated beliefs that aren't yours. That all stems from beliefs that you adopted growing up. Meanings you made about yourself from maybe a different level of consciousness. And you know a baby is worthy. You know a dog is worthy. You know a tree is worthy. You don't doubt that. But you might doubt whether you're worthy. And sometimes the reason we doubt whether we're worthy or not is because childhood energies feel so familiar. Childhood energies, we fight for what feels familiar. And sometimes it feels familiar to be a victim. It feels familiar to have this belief that things happen to me. Instead of realizing things are happening for you. Things are happening for you to grow. Maybe up until this point you believed you weren't worthy, so therefore you tried proving yourself. And the more you tried proving yourself, the more that you were wiring in and having needy energy. And instead, you can bring your energy back into your body. And you can realize that you are worthy for simply being you. But the question I have for you is, who are you? What values do you live by? Values make up your identity. If you work a 9-to-5 job you hate, then you probably value having a stable paycheck. You probably value have someone else to tell you what to do, even though you might not like it. You might value the safety of that. If you're in a relationship where you're getting gaslit, you might value someone else telling you what to do. If you value other people's validation or approval, then you might value other people's validation or approval over your own. One thing that really helped me is understanding who I am, what I stand for, what I like, what I don't like, what I allow into my life, what I don't allow into my life. I started to realize that over validation and approval, I value authenticity and vulnerability. I have the courage to put the real me out there. I started to realize that I lean into tension. The old version of me wanted validation and approval, would be afraid of giving tension to other people, setting boundaries with other people. Now I lean into tension. And that helps me also embody more of my own masculinity. I have a certain standard for my friends. Not that I'm like an army sergeant that's going around telling people what to do, but if someone says something that I don't like or they cross the line with me, I'll express it. Like, hey, that's not cool. Hey, you showed up 20 minutes late. It's not cool. I value my time and I value your time. If you want me to, if you wanted me to be here at 1 o'clock, I'd show up at like 1, maybe 1:05 at the latest, but not like 1:20. So from now on, could you be on time? Cool, yeah. Okay, cool. Not attached. You see, you living, because then you'll find your sense of safety in your own body. You'll find your sense of safety in who you are. And who you are is an end of itself, not you're going to be some way to get some other result. you get in life, a reflection of who you are being. Live by your own values. Step into the unknown. Lean into tension. Value authenticity and vulnerability. Focus on who you want to be in your life and let go of the beliefs that you're broken. Let go of the outdated things that you've attached to and realize that you are who you choose to be right now in this present moment. Now, if you want a meditation, by the way, that will help you to elevate your vibration to a completely new level, then go to whatsmyvibration.com. If you took that quiz in the past, it's all been updated. It's extremely powerful. You calibrate your vibration. You get a meditation for raising to a higher level of consciousness. It will completely transform your life. That's www.whatsmyvibration.com. And then also, if you want a video that's going to show you more than anything else how to heal from the past, how to heal validation and approval, then watch this video right here. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you the cure to codependency, how to never be needy again. I'm going to share with you also my journey through this process, what I've learned about the inner child, how you can heal this process, how you can be in your own frame. This also is directly related